Hey everyone, Tactics here, and with the raid coming out on the weekly reset, it's time to go through and give you all of my tank tips to help you smash through normal and heroic difficulty. As usual here, I do need to give you a couple of disclaimers. First, all the footage we're going to be looking at is based on PTR testing, so things like visuals, things like ability timings, or even the exact functionality of certain abilities may be different from the time we tested versus the time the raid goes live. So don't come after me if some ability is working slightly differently than how I say it in this video. On top of that, Dementius has not been tested yet on the PTR, so he's not going to be included in this video. However, I do have a full speculation video out if you want to check that out, which I'll link down in the description below. Plus, I will be releasing a standalone normal and heroic Dementius guide, which will include all of the tank mechanics on top of all of his other mechanics a few days into the patch once my guild has actually killed him on heroic difficulty. So make sure you are subscribed so you know when that gets posted. Otherwise, let's just hop into it with the first boss here. So this guy's pretty straightforward. It's the first boss, first tank buster. It's not going to be too difficult. It's a taunt at 1. It's called the Obliteration Arcano Cannon. And essentially what this is it's a raid-wide damage hit that is reduced based on distance and also drops a massive puddle underneath you. So when you get it, you just want to run as far away as possible. Now, we were messing around with like going through this like phase wall just to see how it worked. It did work on the PTR. You have an extra action button essentially that lets you teleport. This wall does a bunch of damage, but you can survive it on normal and heroic. I wouldn't recommend doing that. Honestly, I don't think it's super necessary. The damage is not that high. And instead, what I recommend you do is you see this top left corner, essentially, you would tank the boss near here. It would free up this entire space, as you can see, like we're doing, to drop these raid puddles in this area. And then you can drop the tank puddle in this bottom right area, like where you come in on the right. And that would be totally fine. That's actually what I would generally recommend, as it doesn't require some weird stuff with your cape. The other thing is we were able to stack these puddles on the PTR, so you can do that as well. This may be changed to work like One-Armed Bandit, where the puddles moved off each other, in which case you would drop them just one beside the other on this right side wall, which is also totally fine. But if you can stack them, that conserves a bit of space. Now, the other thing to happen in this phase is a soak, which is on heroic only. I believe it's just a group soak with 2 hits. I can fast forward a second here to find it. Okay, here it is. Didn't take me too long to find it. Smile. Basically, it's called Eradicating Salvo, heroic only. It's 2 hits back to back. You need to split your raid in it. If you're a tank that can immune this knockback it has, you can get in both soaks as a little bit of help. But if you can only get in one, that's also totally fine, as long as you get into one of those soaks just to help split that damage. The other thing is the intermission. We'll watch real quick. Basically, you get pushed the entrance here, and then you have to run through a bunch of obstacles. Plus, there's a wall that, again, that same kind of kill wall that you could, as a tank, probably defensive through. But use your extra action button. It's like a phase blink, boom, avoid that stuff, and then you break the shield. And now you have an extra square's worth of room. So again, what I recommend is once you break this shield, we're not going to do it, by the way. We're going to do some weird stuff, but I would recommend you tank the boss like around here. Once you break the shield, you can drop all of your raid puddles along this end, and then you can move back towards the entrance a little bit on the right side of the room and drop your tank puddles over here. You don't need to go all the way to the entrance, just kind of as far as you're able to, as whatever tank spec you are. Again, further is technically a little bit better, but you don't need to get all the way to the entrance. Not a big deal. And you will notice that the puddles we dropped in the previous phase have disappeared at this point, because when that phase wall in the intermission crosses them, it also makes them disappear. So conserves a bit of space for you moving into later on in this boss fight. That is Plexus. So let's move on to Loom'ithar. Loom'ithar, tank, first thing, boss is stationary in phase 1. He just spams like a web blast ability, I think, at the tank. In this phase, it's not a melee hit, it's something else, but it's still physical. Now, the actual tank mechanic is a frontal line attack. On normal, you just point these away from your group, but specifically on heroic, you need to hit the one of these webbings to make it attackable so that your raid can escape. So right off the bat here, we hit the one close to our raid so that they can be easily swapped to. And then, you know, the second one, they come in back to back. So you need to taunt off fairly quickly after the first one goes off, because there is a tank debuff so that the other tank gets it. And then, you know, it doesn't really matter. There's a further than 10-second gap between the end of this combo and the start of the next one. So you can swap back or you can have that tank hold. Doesn't really matter. Now, you can hit a second strand with that second tank buster if you want. It's like potentially funnel damage for certain classes onto the boss. It's a super minor thing. It's not even really necessary, but it's something you can do if you want to. Also, that second tank should be watching anyways in case the first tank misses on heroic. They can correct it and hit something as well. Other than that, phase 1 is pretty straightforward, right? You just stay in melee-ish range of the boss, except for during there's like a big run out ability. Let's see if I can find it. Oh yeah, here it is. Boom. Over infusion burst, everyone needs to run out, and then you run back in. The raid mechanic, they're going to be occasionally dropping puddles around the edge of the room, which is important for the second phase. And so I'm going to actually swap here because we have a second phase which we didn't do damage and like stayed alive for a long time to see what happened. So basically it's going to start out with like a damage amp. Boss drops a 50% damage amp, drops a big puddle on the ground, and this is one of the mechanics in this phase. But basically there's two important mechanics for tanks. The first is the actual tank buster, which is now a full frontal attack. And this one here, Writhing Weave. Boom. We have assigned groups to split damage on this because it is a split damage effect. So you still want to pop a personal. You still want to taunt at 1. Boom. Half the raid in that one. And then half the raid, the other half will be in the other frontal soak. The other thing is Arcane Outrage, which happens basically immediately after every single frontal. Some raid damage, some puddles, and it also spawns an additional arcane puddle on the ground. So on pull, we did not move the boss anywhere. We had him stay in this puddle that he spawned initially, who dropped the first puddle kind of overlapping on it. And then that's kind of what we're going to do for the rest of this fight, is we're going to, point the melee cones towards the outside of the room. So melee is going to get in this and soak that. Boom. I'll taunt off. I'll keep the boss slightly overlapped with the existing puddle. He'll drop the Arcane Outrage puddle. I honestly could have done a little bit more than that, but this is just to make sure melee can still hit. Boom. Now we move a little bit after the Arcane Outrage puddle. And now this gets pointed towards range, who are kind of spread in the direction we're moving. So melee over here, range soak is over here, and that's how we split the group. Just alternate back and forth between that. And again, overlap the Arcane Outrage to conserve space. And then we keep rotating after that. And you can see we rotated away from our web puddles just so that we had good space. We clustered our web puddles in a spot of the room that we weren't going to use for this phase. However, if your boss is living like to the enrage of this fight, you may have to use the entire room. So keep that in mind. You may need to be a bit better with your space, depending on how long this fight actually takes. Now let's go boss number 3, Soulbinder Naazindhri, which is a pretty straightforward fight. The tank buster is a channel. Here it is in Mystic Lash. Each hit stacks up a damage amp debuff on you. There's 6 hits over the course of the channel, so the damage is ramping up over the course of the channel. The boss does retarget if you taunt during the channel, so don't do that because you will get additional stacks that will refresh your debuff, so that's not ideal. And you just taunt after each channel. Pretty straightforward, like a taunt at 1 essentially, which I think is what all these bosses have basically been so far. Positioning wise, this is a bit more involved because you need to kill adds and you need to bring the boss close enough that these lines can hit adds easily. There's only 2 of them. There's 6 across each phase essentially, and the goal here is to kill as many phase blades as possible. And so we kind of move around the room, cleave these phase blades, and then there's a knockback. We'll get knocked towards the next set of phase blades in a second here, and then we'll just position the boss so that the next set of phase blades are easy to get hit by those abilities. I can just show you this real quick. Arcane Expulsion. This is the knockback. Boom. Don't get knocked off the edge. Tank debuff happens right after it, by the way. We should have taunted off. I might have ripped or something here. So just be aware you don't want to take 2 of these back to back. Otherwise, you have a billion stacks. And we just get them close to the next set of adds for easy hitting. In terms of where the adds spawn, this is a little map we threw together based on the PTR. So this may change. This is where the boss starts. So we went phase blade here. We moved across, we killed these 2. We moved across, we killed these 2, so that we killed as many phase blades as possible. And then after we killed the third set of adds, we moved to the middle just for easier grouping. And then these guys, I think we need like 1 grip to get the mage here. And then this guy got in, etc. And we just AoE'd everything down on the outside. And the second set of adds spawn. And I think we went like here, here potentially. And again, went to mid. Obviously, you're going to be dealing with more phase blades now because the kind of mechanic is the number of phase blades ramps up with each ad set. And even if these are different, right, your goal is to hit as many phase blades as possible with your 6 orbs per phase. That is your goal, because those guys deal the most unavoidable group damage. Other than that, it's essentially a one phase encounter with like a little ad intermission. So nothing really changes. It's just adjusting your positioning throughout the fight to make it easier for you to actually cleave those phase blades down. From there, we can move on to Forgeweaver, where mechanically this is definitely a step up compared to the other bosses. Now, in terms of tank stuff, there is a tank dot that stacks up in this fight called Overwhelming Power. It goes out, it's like 46 seconds long or something crazy like that. This is not actually the swap, though, at the start of this boss fight. So in phase 1, the actual swap is called Arcane Obliteration, which is a soak that goes around the active tank that will spawn an ad after a few seconds, and it deals a raid hit based on the number of soakers. So you want at least 2 to 4 players getting into this soak when it goes out, just to make sure that it is reducing the raid damage by enough. So that's what that soak looks like, and you can see we are dragging it away initially. So basically on heroic, what happens is these mobs, the big guy and the boss, can't be within 20 yards of each other. Otherwise, they buff each other. So that's why we're running the ad out there. That being said, I actually think potentially the best thing to do was to drop this guy right next to the boss, have your soakers get in it, and then drag the boss away, because there's actually a short grace period where the mobs don't buff each other. And then even if they do buff each other, once the boss is pulled out of the 20-yard range, the buffs just disappear. So it's actually fine to drop him next to the boss if you move the boss quickly away afterwards. And the reason why that's good is it lets all your melee here just immediately swap to that ad and nuke it down ASAP, because the whole deal is that whenever the boss does mechanics, the ad echoes the mechanics. So the quicker you can kill the ad, the less overall mechanics you're dealing with when it comes to like things to dodge and ads that spawn and that kind of stuff. So you can really make the fight a lot easier by burning those ads quickly. But either or, it doesn't matter. Both strategies totally work. In general, I recommend starting in the middle of the room as opposed to where we were right now. And then you can drop the ad, or you can drag the boss to here to have the 20-yard separation. Just that way, you're just a lot more central, which is easier for the second phase, which I will fast forward to here. Basically, when the boss hits 100 energy, there's an intermission phase. These 3 collectors become active. They start gaining energy at different times. So you can see this one started gaining energy first. There's also these boss frames to the side. You can click on the one gaining energy. And basically when they reach full energy, they're going to channel towards the middle of the room and deal like extremely heavy, basically lethal raid damage. So what you want to do as a group is just try and kill the one gaining energy first and then swap between. Now there's another one gaining energy, so you want to kill this and move to that one. The other thing that happens for tanks is these shielded attendants spawn. And so once the shield breaks, they are tankable. You want to take 1 each, because they gain this really nasty auto attacking attack speed increase. And so this debuff does reset on taunt swap. And so around 5 stacks is where I would say you'd want to swap your guys. So whenever someone reaches 5 stacks, 5-ish stacks, then you can do a swap. They are also useful in this phase if you can't kill the collectors in time, because that beam that the collectors shoot towards the middle of the room that deals lethal damage can actually be intercepted by these attendants. So if you're ever not going to kill a collector before it reaches 100 energy, you as the tank can save the raid by having a attendant be between the collector and the center of the room. Now on normal and heroic, again, week 1 or 2, that might actually happen. Later on in the patch, you're just going to burn the collectors super fast. It's probably not going to be a big deal, but this is a neat tip that tanks can do. It's basically more associated with the mythic mechanic, where you can't kill all the collectors at the same time, but not a problem on normal and heroic. You can just nuke these collectors based on their energy gain, and then the boss comes back. You drag them on top of the boss for some additional cleave, and then they'll just be cleaved down over the course of this initial or this next boss phase, where it's repeated. And then you do 1 more intermission later on, and then you get to the last phase. The boss knocks you back initially. He makes the whole front half of this room basically a void zone, and you're being pulled the entire time. So you want to get knocked to like the entrance of the room here, tank the boss towards the entrance, and just fight that pull in and hopefully kill this boss before he kills you. Pretty cool ending of the fight there. Then we've got Heroic Soul Hunters, the Council Demon Hunter boss. Surely there's going to be a new Demon Hunter spec. Smile. Basically, there's 3 bosses here, right? 2 of them are tankable. It's Valerian and Alyssa. are tankable. Araz is not. So basically one of you is tanking each of these guys, and then you are just following around Araz, who just randomly jumps around the room. So just always bring the bosses to Araz to maximize cleave. In terms of what the tank busters are in this phase, basically there are one for each, obviously. So for Alyssa's going to do a tank cleave that drops souls on the ground. She can probably fast forward a little bit here. Oh, here it is. Fracture. It drops souls on the ground, and these souls spawn based on your positioning. They're behind you to the left and behind you to the right. So you can see here, I'm about to get fractured. I try and spin. Boom, the fracture goes off, and you can see maybe in all the lag, boom, these are my soul fragments. And someone else needs to pick these up to get rid of the tank debuff damage amp that I now have on me. And so, boom, someone's going to pick them up, surely. Boom, boom, and they're gone. And then my damage amp is gone. So that's how that works. So always turn your back to your raid when this goes out in order to drop them near your range and hope that someone picks them up. The other tank debuff here is Ivy, which you can see going off at the same time. On the other tank, this is just a frontal line that also pushes you back. So point this towards the outside of the circle or just away from your group. And again, if this is a pushback, DKs have DA, so they can just do that. But otherwise, you speed to run back. And now, shortly after that, Araz moves away. You just follow Araz. These puddles are being sorted out by a different mechanic with a dot. If this dot, I don't think this dot can actually bounce to you as the tank, but if it does, it's basically a physical damage amp, so it's not ideal. You don't want it. So other people are going to have to be clearing melee for you, but otherwise, this is just the fight, right? You follow around Araz. You can get in these hunt soaks if you're able to. It's a split damage stuff, but it does do a splash on heroic, so you don't want to splash a bunch of other people, so don't do that. But if you're able to get in that soak, it can be helpful. Otherwise, like I said, it's just managing these two tank buffs. Here's the frontal you're going to see go out on me. Point that away, and then Araz is going to jump again, and we're going to follow Araz again. So that is just kind of on repeat all the boss phases, what you're going to be doing on this boss fight. Some kind of interesting mechanics involved in it, but yeah, not too complicated. And now we have even less complicated. We've got Fractillus, where it's, you know, the interesting Tetris boss, probably going to be solved by weak auras in its current state. But also for tanks, it's very straightforward, because I'm pretty sure the optimal strat is just throw your tanks in a corner and forget about them. So basically, you know, people are going to be making walls. Something that does make a wall also is the tank buster, the shockwave slam. So this is going to go out. It's a pretty large knockback. It spawns a wall in the area that you're in. So we just dump the tanks in the corner. We spawned all the tank walls in the corner. As a paladin, the way I counter this knockback is by positioning myself up against this wall. And you're going to see I'm going to get knocked into the wall, essentially, which means I don't get knocked out of melee range. Very useful, especially for tanks that don't have a way to, you know, prevent that with like Death's Advance or like Transcend or that kind of thing. Now that does apply the debuff. As you can see, it's a 55-second debuff. However, that's not where we're taunting, because there's actually something else that comes out shortly after in Nexus Crystallization, which can target either of the two tanks. It does not target one consistently. It will randomly pick between the tanks in terms of who it debuffs, at least on the PTR. So keep that in mind. And when that Nexus Crystallization targeting went out, that's when we either meet taunted, or if it was my co-tank, for example, getting targeted, he would get targeted by that ability. And then once he was done, he would come back and then he would taunt before the next Shockwave Slam. So there's a lot of time. You do not need to taunt immediately after Shockwave Slam. And I can kind of show you what the Nexus Crystallization stuff does, because I'm pretty sure I just constantly get targeted by this ability. Basically, it knocks you back and it breaks the wall. So actually, yeah, I didn't get targeted by this ability this time. My co-tank did. So it's good we didn't taunt, because he's going to be pushed away from the boss melee range, which is obviously something you don't want as the active tank. So basically, he's going to break whatever assigned area he's assigned to break. He gets knocked back to break those walls. And then sometimes you get these circles, depending on which wall you broke. And now he comes back, boom, and now he taunts. So that's what you would do if you're the tank who is supposed to have the boss for the next Shockwave Slam and you got targeted. Obviously, if I had gotten targeted there, he would then just immediately taunt, and then I would go to my area and get knocked away from the boss. So it's a bit flexible in terms of when the exact taunt timing does, but it's not on the backhand, or not the backhand, the Shockwave Slam itself. It's on the crystallization or just after it. So just keep that in mind. Otherwise, not much going on. We're just kind of chilling in this corner the entire boss fight, which is interesting, I guess. I'll say it's interesting, I guess. Yeah. That brings us to the last boss that we're actually going to cover, which is a crazy fight. This fight is crazy. I'm a huge fan of it. I think it's going to be a top tier boss fight. It's Nexus-King Salhadaar. So right off the bat here, something to be aware of as a tank. If you die on heroic difficulty, you get mind controlled. So that's not ideal. So try not to do that. Now, the big thing in phase 1 is the tank combo, because this is one that I think is going to farm a lot of people. So basically, it is a combination 4 casts of 2 different abilities. Each ability always gets casted twice during the combo. One of them is a giant frontal that murders everyone, so you need to point that away from your group. The other is a group soak, which your raid needs to get into at least 3 of over the course of this first phase in order to clear their stacks, as you see here. You need to clear these stacks down to 0, which you get by soaking that Conquer soak. And you don't want to soak 2 from the same combo, as there is a damage amp attached to it. Now, this ability was a bit difficult on the PTR because it was kind of uncertain on how it actually functions, but it turns out there's actually only 4 potential combos of the order of these abilities. That is, it can either go 2 of the same back to back and then 2 of the same. So it can go vanquish, vanquish, conquer, conquer, or it can go conquer, conquer, vanquish, vanquish. That's 2 out of the 4 possible combos. The other 2 combos is it can go 1, 2, 2, 1. So it can go conquer, 2 vanquishes, and then conquer, or it can go vanquish, 2 conquers, and then vanquish. That may be very confusing. So the simple answer is taunt every single time, and you will have a fine lineup of abilities. You will not get murdered by one of the damage amps attached to this mechanic. So just taunt every single time. Now, we didn't necessarily know that on PTR, especially during this initial testing. So like I have to use like things like bubble here because I get a back-to-back vanquish and we weren't sure how it happens. But just know, if you taunt every single time, it is totally fine, and you are not concerned about getting back-to-back the same one. Now, in terms of optimizing how these soaks actually work, in my opinion, the best way to do this, if it remains that there is no minimum soak requirement on Conquer, is that you have one tank solo Conquer on their own, and then the entire raid get into another Conquer with a raid cooldown, like an AMZ, a Rally Devo, or something like that. Just some sort of DR raid cooldown, a Spirit Link rolling, because you do take a bunch of damage from everyone clearing. The other option, if to make it simpler, is you can have half the raid assigned to be on one soak and half the raid assigned to be on the other. But that does actually net out to be a bit more in terms of raid damage, because they're also taking an additional Conquer soak as well, which isn't being split between your entire raid. It's only being split by half. So if you have a tank with either an immunity or even large defensives are capable of doing this without an immunity, right? You can stack a couple large defensive as a tank to solo soak Conquer, then that is potentially ideal. Paladin, for example, can use Bubble Taunt. They can use even just Ardent's Cheat Death as well. I think we were doing it. I was like a DK with like a Vamp Blood plus IBF. You may need to adapt and adjust who is, as your tank combo is going to be soloing each time. Maybe you alternate who solos, because there's going to be 3 sets of this combo along the entire phase. Figure it out. And again, if the soloing thing does not work for your group, don't worry about that. Just split your raid 50-50 and put one Conquer on one stack, one Conquer on the other stack. Now, outside of that, there is some movement on this fight. So basically, there are these lines that are going to spawn on random players that leaves puddles on the ground. So basically, when they go out, here comes the beheads. We're just going to drop these like behind us here. One set, it happens in sets of 2, the second set, and then we immediately move once the second set spawns. Basically, we fill up like a third of the room, we move, and then we do the same thing here. So, you know, we got our soaks coming up, our combos coming up in just a second, and then after the combo, we get 2 more sets of these debuffs, and then we rotate again, and then we push the boss. Now, for this tank positioning, another thing I want to note is you should position such that you assume you are getting Vanquish next until you know the combo, because Vanquish is a 2-second cast. It's very quick, and if you vanquish your raid, they just all immediately die. So position in such a way that you are going to, you know, point Vanquish away from the group, because you have twice as much time with Conquer to get into the right spot. So if you're in a spot that is beneficial for Vanquish, aka you're like over here away from the raid, and you get Conquer, it's very easy to run onto your raid or the right stack or whatever. But if you are on top of your group stack and you get Vanquish, it's a lot harder to get to the right spot because you have half as much time. So that is a note as well on this phase 1 tank mechanic. Now, moving on to phase 2. This auto phase is at 50% or something like that, I think. And in this phase, there is now a dragon that appears. Hello, dragon. And there are 2 tank busters to be aware of. So the first is Cosmic Maw. This happens shortly into the fight. It's going to happen in a few seconds, surely. And basically, this is a damage amp for the next tank buster. So you want someone to take this, and then you do want to actually swap here. I think we were just seeing how it would be with AMS and that stuff. But basically, that's just a physical hit and short dot and damage amp. And then the next tank buster is Dimension Breath, which is a frontal beam that functions a lot like Razageth if you played that boss fight, where the damage it deals to you over the duration of the channel then explodes for raid damage at the end. So if you have stuff like AMS, it can be very strong. If you have stuff like Bubble or Spell Warding, it can be very strong. If you don't have those things, you just want to stack up your biggest DR on that ability. So like Warrior, for example, you can do the Spell Reflect DR increase plus a shield wall. That would be a ton of DR. It would be very, very strong against this as an example. Other tanks, again, diffuse magic, that kind of thing. Every tank has something here that they could use on this ability. You do get to pick which tank you want that on, by the way, so you can make sure you have the tank that has the strongest abilities for that is assigned to doing that. And just point this away from your group, because on Heroic, it will also put that debuff on anyone else it hits. And as you can see, there are also these rifts that are shooting this beam as well, very similar to the first tier Delve boss. If you remember, Zekfir, I think, was his name or something like that. And then, I think twice during this phase, you're going to get this intermission phase where you need to split your raid in half. You fight some ads. Nothing super interesting happens on this. There's just like an interrupt, I think. I think you can also like CC these Reaper ads to reduce their damage. But this is just, you know, go to this side. You need to kill this Titan before he blows up, essentially. And then you go back to the boss. And you repeat the boss phase here. The second phase with the beam and the Cosmic Jaw thing. So same bit. Someone takes the jaws. Someone takes the beams. Here's another example. Dimension Breath. Pointing it. This is with Bubble. So you can see after this bubble goes out, nothing happens. No one takes damage. Very hype. And now we have the intermission, not the intermission, I guess, the transition into the last phase where you have this like burn phase where you're on the boss with like a damage amp and that kind of thing. And you get this guy as low as possible to reduce how much the boss gets healed. And then we get the last phase itself where this phase is crazy. So basically there's 2 tank busters in this phase. They both leave the same debuff on you. So it doesn't matter which debuff or which tank buster you took. You will taunt every single time this debuff goes out. Now, in terms of what this ability does for Galactic Smash, you want to get this away from the boss initially. And honestly, this is a boss where there might be a better strategy, and I may talk about that or put a post in terms of a better strategy, you know, later on once things actually go live. But we were just starting by dropping out all these things, you know, relatively far from our group. It's going to drop 6 stars. Boom. These first initially do a pull-in like Nexus Princess Kaiveza, which is why we did the even spread from the raid, so we wouldn't get sucked into one of these portals. And then they become these stars. And these have these like rings that you need to avoid. You also need to avoid them yourself. And then they interact with the next tank mechanic in Starkiller Swing. So when that goes out, again, that always targets the tank and 2 players, and you get a line attack. So you can see these lines, and basically you have to hit one of these stars or you deal a ton of raid damage. So pick a different star for each person. The tank and then the 2 other people are killing stars. Boom. And then you swap again. And then there's going to be another Starkiller Swing. So again, there's now only going to be 3 stars left if you hit all your stars. So you need to make sure that you are aiming at a star. And as you can tell, you don't need to go behind the stars. This will pierce you and it will hit the thing behind you. So as long as you are, you know, hitting a star, or there's a star lined up with you, that is totally fine. You don't need to get behind it. And then we go back to Galactic Smash. So it always goes Galactic Smash, Starkiller Swing, Galactic Smash. And you're just taunting every single time. The more stars that are out, the more area denial there is. Once the stars are actually gone, it's not a big deal. But again, here's the next Galactic Smash. Things are going to get even crazier. Boom. Portals pulling us in. And then we're going back. We got the line attacks again. We got these circles we need to dodge once again. So there's a lot going on in this phase. It looks absolutely sick. It's going to be hard. but you know, it's going to be super cool. So I'm really excited for it. And that wraps up this video, guys. So hopefully this helps you in the new raid. If it did, be sure to hit that subscribe button, as I have a ton of great content still planned, including Keystone Legend route walkthroughs, mythic raid guides, and a lot more. As always, I need to give a massive thank you out to all of my Patreons for their continued support and making content like this possible. Otherwise, thanks to everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.